The chamber was silent. Not the comfortable silence of peace, but the heavy silence of judgment. Ambassador Raymond Cole stood alone on a platform of black glass, surrounded by thousands of alien eyes watching him from towering seats that rose into the darkness above. This was the Hall of Voices, the heart of the Galactic Council. For 800 years, this chamber had decided the fate of civilizations. Species had been welcomed here with celebration. Others had been condemned to extinction with a single vote. Today, humanity stood trial. Raymond was 57 years old, a former soldier who had spent the last 20 years learning the art of diplomacy. He had negotiated peace treaties on 3 continents. He had talked terrorists into releasing hostages. He had never felt fear like this. The council representatives numbered over 400, each one speaking for billions of lives across the galaxy. Some were humanoid, with faces that almost looked familiar. Others were creatures of nightmare, beings of crystal and shadow and living flame. They watched Raymond with expressions he could not read, and their silence pressed down on him like a physical weight. High Chancellor Morvis rose from the central throne. He was tall and thin, his skin the color of ash, his eyes burning with pale blue fire. The Morvani had ruled the council for 3 centuries, and Morvis himself had served as chancellor for 60 years. In all that time, no one had successfully challenged his decisions. "Ambassador Cole," Morvis said, his voice echoing through the chamber without any visible amplification, "you stand before this council, accused of crimes against galactic stability. How does humanity answer?" Raymond took a deep breath. His handlers back on Earth had given him a script. They had told him to be humble, to apologize, to beg for mercy. They did not understand what he had learned during his 6-month journey to this place. The council did not respect humility. They respected strength. "High Chancellor," Raymond said, his voice steady and clear, "I reject the premise of your question." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Several delegates rose from their seats in outrage. Morvis raised one long-fingered hand, and silence returned instantly. "You reject the premise?" The Chancellor's voice was cold. "Ambassador, you are not in a position to reject anything. Your species has been a provisional member of the Accord for barely 50 years. In that time, you have violated 17 treaties, expanded into restricted space, and developed weapons technology that exceeds your authorized level by a factor of 12. "All true," Raymond agreed. "And yet, I reject the premise because this is not a trial. It is a performance. The Council decided humanity's fate before I ever entered this chamber." The murmur became a roar. Delegates shouted in languages Raymond did not understand, their voices blending into a wall of sound that should have been overwhelming. Instead, Raymond stood perfectly still and waited. Morvis did not silence them this time. He studied Raymond with those burning eyes, and something that might have been curiosity flickered across his ancient face. "You are bold, Ambassador." "Foolishly so. What makes you believe you know the Council's intentions?" Raymond smiled. It was not a warm smile, because 3 weeks ago, the Valderan sent a distress signal. Their homeworld was under attack by the hegemony of Krath. They begged the Council for help, as is their right under the Accord. "Do you know what the Council did, High Chancellor?" Silence. Nothing. "You did nothing. The Valderan have been loyal members of the Accord for 400 years. They have paid their tributes. They have followed your laws. And when they faced extinction, you turned away." Morvis's eyes narrowed. "The hegemony is not a member of the Accord. We have no authority to intervene in conflicts beyond our borders." "No authority?" Raymond's voice rose. "You command fleets that could darken the stars. You rule an alliance of 3,000 worlds. You have the power to stop genocide with a single order, and you hide behind bureaucratic excuses while innocent people die. You speak of matters you do not understand, Ambassador. The hegemony controls territory spanning 200 systems. A war with them would cost millions of lives. And how many Valdaran lives have already been lost while you calculated the cost? The question hung in the air. Raymond saw several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. The Valdaran representative, a small being with silver fur and enormous dark eyes, was weeping silently. Humanity did not calculate the cost, Raymond continued. When the Valdaran begged for help, we answered. Morvis went very still. What have you done? Raymond pulled a small device from his pocket and pressed a single button. The chamber's holographic systems activated, displaying an image that made every delegate gasp. It was a fleet. A human fleet. 72 warships hung in formation around a blue-green planet. The Valdaran homeworld. And behind them, scattered across the void like broken toys, were the burning remnants of the hegemony invasion force. 26 hours ago, Raymond said, the Earth Defense Fleet engaged the hegemony at Valdaran Prime. The enemy numbered 140 vessels. They expected to find a defenseless world. Instead, they found us. The holographic display shifted, showing tactical data that scrolled too fast for most eyes to follow. Battle formations. Casualty reports. The final surrender of the hegemony commander. The engagement lasted 4 hours. We lost 11 ships. The hegemony lost everything. Morvis's face had gone pale. This is an act of war. The hegemony will retaliate. Let them try. Raymond's voice was ice. We did not come to this galaxy to cower. We did not travel between the stars to watch innocent people die while politicians debated. When someone cries for help, humanity answers. He turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber. You brought me here to condemn my species, to contain us, to strip away our ships and our weapons and leave us helpless on our homeworld. You fear what we might become, and perhaps you are right to fear. But I have a different question for this council. He pointed at the holographic image of the Valdaran homeworld, where rescue ships were already landing to deliver supplies to the survivors. 12 billion Valdaran are alive today because humanity refused to stand by. 12 billion people who would have died if we had followed your rules. So I ask you, delegates of the Galactic Council, is that the species you want to contain? Is that the threat you want to eliminate? He paused, letting his words sink in. Or is that the ally you have been waiting for? The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates screamed at each other. Factions that had been stable for centuries suddenly found themselves divided. The Valdaran representative had fallen to his knees, his hands raised toward the human ambassador in a gesture of gratitude that transcended language. Morvis pounded his staff against the floor, demanding order, but the sound was lost in the storm. Raymond Cole stood at the center of it all, watching the galaxy reshape itself around him. He knew the vote would be close. He knew the hegemony would come for Earth eventually. He knew that humanity had just painted a target on itself that would never come off. But he also knew something else, something the Council had forgotten in their 800 years of careful neutrality. Sometimes, the only way to change the universe is to refuse to play by its rules. The holographic display flickered, and a new message appeared. It was from Earth, from Admiral Diana Walsh, commander of the Defense Fleet. Valdaran secure. Hegemony forces retreating. Awaiting. Further orders. Raymond read the message and smiled. The orders would come soon enough. Because somewhere out there, beyond the borders of the Accord, other species were suffering. Other worlds were burning. Other voices were crying out in the darkness, begging for someone, anyone. To hear them, humanity had heard, and this was only the beginning. The message arrived at Earth Command 17 hours after the council session ended. Admiral Diana Walsh read it 3 times before she believed it was real. The hegemony of Kroth had declared total war on humanity. Diana stood at the center of the war room, a vast underground chamber beneath the mountains of Switzerland, where the fate of 8 billion lives would be decided. Holographic displays surrounded her, showing fleet positions, supply routes, and intelligence reports that updated every few seconds. She was 61 years old, with silver hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much death. She had commanded the Valderan operation personally, watching from her flagship as human weapons tore through hegemony ships like paper. It had been the greatest victory in human history. Now she was preparing for the greatest war. The hegemony is mobilizing everything, reported General Marcus Webb, her chief strategist. Intelligence estimates their total fleet strength at 8,000 vessels. They have already begun moving toward our border. How long until they reach Earth? At current speed, 37 days. But they will not come directly for Earth. The hegemony fights by consuming. They will attack our outer colonies first, strip them of resources, and use what they take to fuel their advance. Diana studied the tactical display. Humanity's colonies spread across 47 systems, connected by trade routes and supply lines that had taken generations to build. Each colony represented millions of lives. Each one was now a target. "We have 72 combat vessels," she said quietly. "Even after our losses at Valderan, we are outnumbered more than 100 to 1. "Yes, Admiral." "Then we cannot fight a conventional war." Webb nodded slowly. "No, we cannot." Diana turned to face the room. Her senior staff watched her with expressions ranging from fear to determination. They knew what was coming. They knew the odds. "The hegemony has conquered 30 species over the last 2 centuries, Diana said. "They have never lost a war. Their tactics are brutal but predictable. They overwhelm their enemies with numbers, crush resistance through attrition, and absorb whatever remains into their empire." She pulled up a new display, showing the hegemony's internal structure. But empires built on conquest have a weakness. The species they have absorbed are not loyal. They serve out of fear, not devotion. If we can prove that the hegemony can be hurt, if we can show that their power is not absolute, those subjugated worlds might find their courage. "You are talking about insurgency," Webb said. "Guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale. I am talking about survival. We cannot match their strength, so we will break their confidence instead. Every ship we destroy, every supply line we cut, every victory we steal will send a message to the slaves of the hegemony. Resistance is possible. Freedom is possible." She turned to her communications officer. "Send word to Ambassador Cole. I need him to work the council. Find us allies. Find us intelligence. Find us anything that might give us an edge. The council refused to support us, Admiral. They made that clear. The council is not unified. Cole showed us that. There are factions who hate the hegemony as much as we do. We just need to find them." The communications officer nodded and hurried away. Diana returned her attention to the tactical display. The hegemony fleet was a tide of red icons advancing toward human space. In 37 days, that tide would crash against the walls of everything humanity had built. She had 37 days to figure out how to stop it. Meanwhile, on the far side of the galaxy, Ambassador Raymond Cole was having a very different kind of battle. The council had adjourned without voting. High Chancellor Morvis had suspended the session indefinitely, citing the need to reassess the situation in light of new developments. It was a bureaucratic delay, nothing more, but it gave Raymond time to work. He found the Valderan representative in a quiet garden at the edge of the council complex. The small silver-furred being sat alone on a bench, staring at a fountain that burbled with water from a dozen different worlds. "Ambassador Tellus," Raymond said, approaching carefully. "May I join you?" Tellus looked up, His dark eyes were still wet with tears, but there was something new in them now. Something that looked almost like hope. "You saved my people," Tellus said. 12 billion lives. I do not have words for what that means. Raymond sat beside him. I did what anyone should have done. What the Council should have done. The Council has not acted decisively in centuries. They have forgotten what it means to stand for something. Tellus paused. But you have not forgotten. Your species is young, Ambassador. Perhaps that is your advantage. Young, and about to face the largest military power outside the Accord. The hegemony will not stop with Earth. You know this. Tellus nodded slowly. I know. They have long memories, the Kroth. They will destroy you for what you did, and then they will return to finish what they started with my people. Unless we stop them. You cannot stop them. No one can. Raymond leaned forward. Ambassador Tellus, I did not come here to debate possibility. I came here because humanity needs allies. The Valdirn owe us nothing beyond gratitude, but I am asking anyway. Will you help us? Tellus was silent for a long moment. The fountain continued to burble, indifferent to the weight of the decision being made beside it. The Valdirn have no military, Tellus finally said. Our ships were destroyed generations ago when we first joined the Accord. We have engineers, scientists, thinkers, not warriors. Then give us your engineers, your scientists, your thinkers. Help us build better weapons, better ships, better strategies. The hegemony expects to fight a young species with primitive technology. Let us surprise them. A flicker of something passed through Tellus's eyes. You would trust us with your military secrets? We would trust you with our survival. Tellus stood and walked to the fountain. He dipped one small hand into the water and watched the ripples spread outward. There is something you should know, Ambassador Cole. The hegemony is powerful, but they are not invincible. 50 years ago, they attempted to conquer a species called the Morith. The Morith were peaceful, like us. They had no weapons, no military tradition. But they had something else. What? Knowledge. The Morith were the greatest scientists in known space. When the hegemony came for them, they did not fight with ships or soldiers. They fought with information. They released a virus into the hegemony's computer networks that crippled their fleet for months. The hegemony eventually won through sheer numbers, but the Morith made them pay dearly for every system they captured. Raymond's heart began to beat faster. Do the Morith still exist? In a manner of speaking. They were absorbed into the hegemony, like all conquered species. But absorption does not mean extinction. The Morith still live, still work, still remember. And they hate their masters with a passion that burns even after 50 years. Can you contact them? Tellus turned to face Raymond, and now there was something fierce in his dark eyes. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. I can do better than contact them, Ambassador. I can introduce you to their leader. She has been waiting for someone like you for a very long time. Raymond felt the pieces beginning to click into place. This was not just a war of ships and soldiers. This was a war of ideas, of information, of courage. And humanity was no longer fighting alone. Take me to her, he said. Tellus nodded and began walking toward the garden's exit. Raymond followed, his mind racing with possibilities. Back on Earth, Admiral Walsh was preparing for the first engagement of the war. Back at the Council, High Chancellor Morvis was trying to maintain a neutrality that was crumbling by the hour. And somewhere in the depths of hegemony space, a resistance was stirring that the hegemony had conquered 30 species in 200 years. They had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that did not just fight with weapons, but with hope. An enemy called humanity. The first shots of the war would be fired within the week. And when they were, the galaxy would learn what happens when the desperate cry for help. And someone actually answers. The colony of New Helsinki was burning. Commander Victor Okafor watched from the bridge of his destroyer as hegemony forces poured fire into the planet's surface. The colony had been home to 2 million people, farmers, teachers, children. Now they were refugees, cramming into evacuation ships that raced toward the jump point while his squadron tried to buy them time. Victor was 43 years old, a career officer who had never expected to fight a real war. The peacekeeping missions had been different, clean, professional. This was chaos and death on a scale he could barely comprehend. Commander, the evacuation is 70% complete, reported his tactical officer. But the hegemony is breaking through our defensive line. Victor studied the display. His squadron numbered 8 ships against the enemy's 60. They had been fighting for 6 hours, and every minute bought was paid for in human blood. How many civilians still on the surface? 600,000. Victor closed his eyes. 600,000 people who would die if his ships failed. 600,000 reasons to keep fighting even when the math said it was impossible. Signal the fleet, he said quietly. We're going to execute the Hades Protocol. His bridge crew went silent. The Hades Protocol was a suicide maneuver developed in the desperate weeks after the hegemony declared war. It involved overloading a ship's reactor core and ramming it into the enemy formation, creating a chain reaction that could destroy dozens of vessels. Not no one who executed the Hades Protocol survived. Commander, his first officer said carefully, Admiral Walsh gave explicit orders. The Hades Protocol is a last resort. Lieutenant, look at that display and tell me this is not the last resort. The first officer looked. The hegemony fleet was overwhelming them. For every enemy ship they destroyed, 3 more took its place. The defensive line was collapsing, and once it fell, the evacuation ships would be helpless. All hands, Victor announced over the ship-wide channel. This is the commander. In approximately 15 minutes, I am going to ram this ship into the hegemony flagship. Anyone who wishes to transfer to the evacuation fleet has 10 minutes to reach the escape pods. He paused, knowing what came next would define his legacy. But I am asking for volunteers to stay with me. The more power we can direct to the engines, the more damage we can do. Every person who stays might save 1,000 lives on those transports. He released the channel and waited. The first volunteer appeared on the bridge within 30 seconds. Then another. And another. Within 5 minutes, his crew had made their decision. No one left. Victor felt tears threatening to form and forced them back. This was not the time for emotion. This was the time for action. Helm, set collision course for the enemy flagship. Engineering, begin reactor overload sequence. Course set, Commander. Overload at 50% and climbing. Victor watched the enemy flagship grow larger on the view screen. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of his destroyer, bristling with weapons that could vaporize his ship in seconds. But it was also the command vessel for this entire sector of the hegemony fleet. If he could destroy it, the remaining enemy ships would lose coordination. The evacuation might succeed. Might. That was the word his entire life came down to now. Might save 600,000 people. Might buy humanity another day. Might make his death mean something. Overload at 70%. Hull temperature rising. Maintain course. The hegemony flagship began firing. The first shots went wide, its gunners unprepared for a direct assault. The second volley hit Victor's shields and collapsed them instantly. The third tore through his forward sections, killing a dozen crew members in the space between heartbeats. Overload at 90%. 30 seconds to impact. Victor gripped the arms of his command chair as the ship shuddered around him. Warning lights flashed across every console. The view screen filled with the image of the enemy flagship. so close now that he could see individual weapon ports. "It has been an honor serving with you all," he said, and then the universe turned white. 300 light years away, Ambassador Raymond Cole stood in a hidden chamber beneath the surface of a dead moon. The Morath Resistance had chosen this place for their headquarters precisely because no one would think to look here. It was the perfect location for a conspiracy. The woman standing before him was not what he had expected. Lyra Voss was tall and slender, with skin that shimmered faintly in the low light. The Morath had been a beautiful species before the hegemony came. Now their beauty was marked by scars, by modifications forced upon them by their conquerors, by the weight of 50 years of oppression. But her eyes were clear and sharp, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had been waiting for this moment her entire life. "You are the human ambassador," she said, "the one who saved the Valdarin. I am. And I understand you have been waiting to speak with someone like me." Lyra smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I have been waiting for someone stupid enough to challenge the hegemony. Someone desperate enough to fight even when the odds are impossible. Someone who might actually give my people a reason to hope. I am all of those things." "Good. Then perhaps we can help each other." She gestured, and a holographic display activated in the center of the chamber. It showed the internal structure of the hegemony empire, thousands of systems connected by supply lines and communication networks. "The hegemony appears invincible from the outside," Lyra explained. "But from the inside, they are rotting. The species they have conquered outnumber the Kroth by a factor of 20. They are held in place by fear, by surveillance, by the knowledge that any resistance will be crushed without mercy. But if that fear could be broken, then the empire would tear itself apart." Lyra's eyes gleamed. "That is what we have been working toward for 50 years. Building networks, planting agents, waiting for the moment when someone would give us a sign that resistance was possible. And now you have given us that sign, Ambassador. The hegemony lost their invasion fleet at Valdarin Prime. For the first time in 2 centuries, they have been defeated in open battle. The news is spreading through their empire like fire. Slaves who had given up hope are beginning to whisper. Collaborators are reconsidering their loyalties. The cracks are forming." Raymond leaned forward. "What do you need from us?" "We need you to keep fighting. Every battle you win, every ship you destroy, every day you survive sends a message to the billions living under hegemony rule. You are the proof that the Krath can be challenged. You are the spark that will light the fire. And in return?" Lyra pulled up a new display. It showed detailed schematics of hegemony vessels, shield frequencies, weapon systems, command codes. "In return, we give you this. 50 years of intelligence gathered from inside the enemy's own systems. Everything you need to hurt them where it matters most." Raymond stared at the display. It was more than intelligence. It was a treasure beyond measure. With this information, humanity's fleets could fight the hegemony on something approaching equal terms. "There is one more thing," Lyra said quietly. "A secret that even most of the resistance does not know. Tell me, the hegemony has a weapon, a device capable of destroying entire planets. They have used it only twice in their history, both times to annihilate species that resisted too effectively. It is called the Void Hammer, and it is stored in a facility deep within Krath space." Raymond felt cold spread through his chest. "They would use it against Earth? If they become desperate enough, yes. The Krath do not accept defeat. They would rather destroy your entire species than admit that humans could challenge their dominion. Then we need to destroy it first." Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, and I believe I know how." She pulled up a final display, showing a heavily fortified installation orbiting a massive gas giant. "The Void Hammer requires a specialized power source to activate. That power source is manufactured in only one facility in the entire empire. If that facility were destroyed, the weapon would become useless. How heavily defended is it? Extremely, but not impregnable. A small strike force, armed with the right intelligence, could infiltrate the system and destroy the facility before the hegemony realized what was happening. Raymond studied the display. The plan was insane. The risks were astronomical. The chances of success were tiny, but so was the alternative. "I need to speak with Admiral Walsh," he said. "We will need her best pilots for this mission." Lyra extended her hand. "Then we have an alliance, Ambassador Cole. May it last long enough for both our peoples to see freedom." Raymond took her hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "It will," he said. "It has to." As they sealed their agreement, news of Commander Okoffer's sacrifice was spreading across human space. New Helsinki had been lost, but 600,000 civilians had escaped. The evacuation ships had reached safety moments before the hegemony fleet could intercept them. And across the galaxy, in the slave quarters of 100 conquered worlds, beings who had forgotten what hope felt like began to remember. The war was far from over. But something had changed. For the first time, the hegemony was afraid. The strike team assembled in a hangar bay on the dark side of Earth's moon. Captain Maria Santos looked at the 11 pilots and soldiers who would accompany her on the mission to destroy the hegemony's power facility. She knew most of them would not return. Maria was 38 years old, a veteran of the colonial conflicts who had transferred to special operations after distinguishing herself in a dozen impossible situations. Admiral Walsh had chosen her personally for this mission, and the weight of that trust pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. "You all know what we're facing," she began, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "The Keldris facility is the most heavily defended installation in hegemony space after their homeworld. 300 ships patrol the surrounding system. Ground defenses could destroy a fleet before it got within weapons range. Every piece of military logic says this mission is suicide." She paused, meeting each pilot's eyes in turn. "But we're not here because of military logic. We're here because somewhere out there, a weapon exists that could turn Earth into a graveyard. We're here because our families, our friends, everyone we have ever loved is counting on us to do what no one else can." She pulled up a holographic display showing their flight path. "The Morith resistance has given us something invaluable. Codes that will let us pass through the outer patrol line disguised as a hegemony supply convoy. From there, we will have approximately 6 minutes to reach the facility, deploy our weapons, and escape before their defense systems respond." "6 minutes," muttered Lieutenant James Park, her second in command. "That's not much margin for error." "There is no margin for error. Either we succeed or we die trying. Those are our only options." The room was silent. Maria could see the fear on their faces, the understanding of what she was asking them to do. But she could also see something else: determination, resolve, the stubborn human, refusal to accept defeat even when defeat seemed certain. "Any questions?" No one spoke. "Then get to your ships. We launch in 20 minutes. As the team dispersed to their fighters, Admiral Walsh appeared at the hangar entrance. She was alone, her face carved from stone, her eyes carrying the weight of every life she had sent into danger over the past months of war. "Captain Santos," she said quietly. "A moment." Maria approached and saluted. "Admiral." Walsh returned the salute, then did something unexpected. She took Maria's hand in both of hers. "I have sent thousands of soldiers into battle," Walsh said. "I have written letters to their families when they did not return. I have made peace with the cost of command." She paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. but I have never sent anyone on a mission like this one. I understand, Admiral. No, you don't. Walsh's grip tightened. This mission was supposed to be mine. I volunteered to lead it myself. The President refused. Earth cannot afford to lose its senior admiral, he said. She almost spat the words. As if any life is more valuable than another. Maria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Admiral, I did not volunteer for this mission because I want to die. I volunteered because I want my nephew to grow up in a galaxy where he does not have to fear the hegemony. That is worth any price. Walsh nodded slowly and released her hand. Then go, Captain. And may whatever gods watch over humanity go with you. Maria turned and walked toward her ship without looking back. The strike team launched 17 minutes later, their small craft accelerating toward the jump point that would carry them deep into enemy territory. Behind them, Earth hung blue and beautiful in the darkness, a reminder of everything they were fighting for. Meanwhile, at the Galactic Council, Ambassador Raymond Cole was fighting a different kind of battle. The Council had reconvened for an emergency session. The war between humanity and the hegemony had been raging for 3 months now, and its effects were spreading across the galaxy. Trade routes were disrupted. Refugees flooded into Accord space. Neutral worlds were beginning to question their neutrality. High Chancellor Morris stood at his throne, his pale eyes sweeping across the assembled delegates. The situation has become untenable, he declared. The conflict between Earth and the hegemony threatens the stability of the entire region. The Council must act. Raymond rose from his seat. The Council had the chance to act before this war began. You chose neutrality. You cannot now claim responsibility for its consequences. We are not claiming responsibility, Ambassador. We are claiming authority. The Council has voted to impose a ceasefire on both parties. Humanity must withdraw its forces from hegemony-contested space immediately. A murmur swept through the chamber. Raymond felt cold fury building in his chest. And the hegemony? What will they be required to do? They have agreed to halt their advance pending diplomatic negotiations. They have agreed? Raymond's voice rose. High Chancellor, the hegemony is currently burning its way through our outer colonies. They have killed millions of our citizens. And you expect us to simply stop fighting because they have agreed to talk? The Council expects you to recognize the reality of your situation, Ambassador. Humanity is losing this war. Your fleet has been reduced by half. Your colonies are falling one by one. Without the Council's intervention, your species will be extinct within the year. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Raymond knew they were true. The war was not going well. Despite Lyra's intelligence, despite their tactical innovations, the hegemony's numbers were overwhelming, but he also knew something the Council did not. High Chancellor, he said slowly, you speak of our losses. You speak of our imminent defeat, but you do not speak of what we have accomplished. What you have accomplished is irrelevant in the face of extinction, is it? Raymond activated his own holographic display. In 3 months of fighting, humanity has destroyed over 500 hegemony vessels. We have liberated 2 planets that they had conquered. We have inspired resistance movements across their empire that are now tying down significant portions of their military. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. The hegemony has not lost 500 ships in battle in 200 years. They have not lost a conquered world in even longer. And they have never faced a coordinated resistance from within their own borders. These are meaningless statistics, Ambassador. The hegemony still commands thousands of ships. They will crush you eventually. Perhaps. But consider this, High Chancellor. Raymond's voice dropped to almost a whisper. If a young species, barely 50 years into interstellar travel, can hurt the hegemony this badly, what might happen if the entire galaxy stood against them? Silence. The Council has spent centuries avoiding conflict with the hegemony. You have watched them conquer species after species, always telling yourselves that appeasement was the wise choice. But appeasement only works when your enemy is satisfied. The hegemony is never satisfied. They will continue expanding until they control everything or until someone stops them. He turned to face the delegates directly. Humanity is trying to stop them. We are bleeding and dying for a cause that benefits every species in this galaxy. And you want us to surrender? To accept a ceasefire that will only give our enemy time to rebuild their forces? The Valdoran representative stood. Earth speaks the truth. The hegemony promised peace when they came for my world. They promised negotiations. They lied. They always lie. Other delegates began to murmur. Raymond could see the Council's unity cracking, the carefully maintained neutrality beginning to fracture. Morvis raised his hand for silence. The vote has been taken. The Council demands a ceasefire. Then the Council will have to enforce it, Raymond said quietly. Because humanity will not stop fighting. Not while our people are still dying. Not while the hegemony still threatens our existence. If you want to stop us, you will have to destroy us yourselves. He gathered his materials and walked toward the exit. Ambassador Cole. Morvis's voice was sharp with anger. You cannot simply walk away from the Council's authority. Raymond paused at the door and looked back. Watch me. He left the chamber as chaos erupted behind him. Deep in hegemony space, Captain Maria Santos and her strike team emerged from their final jump. The Keldus facility hung before them, a massive structure orbiting a gas giant the color of dried blood. Defense satellites filled the surrounding space like a deadly constellation. Maria checked her instruments. The Morith codes were holding. The hegemony systems recognized them as friendly. All ships maintain formation. We have 5 minutes until we reach weapons range. Her comm crackled with acknowledgments. 11 voices. 11 lives that would end in the next few minutes if anything went wrong. 4 minutes? 3 minutes? The first alarm began to sound. Captain, they're on to us. Defense satellites are powering weapons. Maria's hands flew across her controls. All ships, attack run now. Fire everything you have. The universe exploded into chaos. Laser fire and missiles filled the void around them. Ships began to die, their pilots screaming as their craft were torn apart. Maria pushed through the storm, her eyes fixed on the facility growing larger in her view screen. She could see the power generators now, massive structures that pulsed with energy. This is Santos. I'm making the run. Cover me. Her remaining wingmates threw themselves into the path of incoming fire, buying her precious seconds with their lives. The facility's surface rushed toward her. Warning lights screamed. Her shields collapsed. Her hull began to buckle. She launched her weapons at the last possible moment and pulled up, so hard that the G-forces nearly tore her apart. Behind her, the facility erupted in a chain reaction that lit up the entire system. The Void Hammer would never fire. Maria Santos died 47 seconds later, her damaged ship unable to survive the escape attempt. She was smiling when the end came. Her last transmission reached Earth 3 days later. Mission accomplished. Tell my nephew I love him. Admiral Walsh read the message alone in her quarters. Then she wept. The final battle began on a Tuesday morning. Earth time. Admiral Diana Walsh stood on the bridge of the Resolute, humanity's last great warship, watching the hegemony fleet emerge from faster-than-light travel. The enemy numbered over 2,000 vessels, every ship the Kroth could spare from their crumbling empire. They had come to end the war with a single decisive blow. Earth hung behind the human fleet, blue and beautiful and terribly fragile. 8 billion people were looking up at the sky, knowing that everything depended on what happened in the next few hours. The human fleet numbered 112 ships. They had been joined by 37 Valderan vessels, crewed by engineers and scientists who had never been warriors but had chosen to fight anyway. 18 Morith ships had slipped away from hegemony control to join them, their crews risking everything on the desperate hope that freedom was still possible. 167 ships against 2,000. The math was brutal and simple. "Admiral," reported her tactical officer, "the enemy fleet is deploying in standard formation. They are waiting for us to engage." Walsh studied the display. The hegemony commander was confident. He had every reason to be. His forces could crush the human fleet without breaking stride, but confidence could be a weakness. "Signal the fleet," Walsh ordered. "Execute Plan Prometheus." The human ships began to move, not in the defensive formation the hegemony expected, but spreading out in seemingly random patterns. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks. Their sensors detected the movement, but could not interpret it. "Phase 1 complete," reported Commander Torres, Walsh's chief strategist. "Enemy response is nominal. Begin Phase 2. Across the solar system, hidden installations that humanity had been building in secret for months came to life. Weapon platforms concealed in the asteroid belt. Missile batteries buried beneath the surfaces of moons. Automated defense systems that had been waiting for this moment. The first volley caught the hegemony fleet completely by surprise. Thousands of missiles emerged from the darkness, converging on the end. Emmy formation from every direction. Hegemony point defense systems struggled to respond, their targeting computers overwhelmed by the sheer volume of incoming fire. When the explosions faded, nearly 300 enemy ships had been destroyed. "Admiral, enemy fleet is breaking formation. They are advancing toward Earth." Walsh nodded grimly. The trap had worked, but it had only evened the odds slightly. The hegemony still outnumbered them by more than 10 to 1. "All ships engage at will. Make them pay for every kilometer." The battle became a storm of fire and death. Human ships danced through the hegemony formation, striking from unexpected angles, exploiting the weaknesses that Morith intelligence had revealed. The Valderan vessels fought with suicidal bravery, their crews knowing that they owed humanity everything and were willing to give everything in return. Hours passed. Ships died. The human fleet was being whittled away, but so was the hegemony force. For every human vessel destroyed, they took 3 or 4 enemy ships with them, but it was not enough. "Admiral, we have lost 60% of our fleet. The enemy is within weapons range of Earth's orbital defenses." Walsh closed her eyes for a moment. The math had caught up with them. They had fought brilliantly. They had made the hegemony bleed, but in the end, numbers told the truth. "Signal all remaining ships. We will make our final stand at the orbital platform. If Earth falls, it will not fall quietly." She was about to give the order when her communications officer suddenly sat up straight. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from the jump point. Multiple contacts." Walsh spun toward the display. "Hegemony reinforcements?" "No, Admiral. These signatures are—" The officer's voice trailed off in disbelief. "Council. They're council ships." The new arrivals emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 500 warships bearing the insignia of the Galactic Council, led by a flagship that dwarfed anything else on the battlefield. "High Chancellor." Morvis's voice filled every communication channel. "Hegemony forces, this is the Galactic Council. You have violated the sovereign space of a council-member world. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Silence from the hegemony fleet. "This is Supreme Commander Vok of the hegemony of Kraf," came the reply, cold and contemptuous. "The Council has no authority here. Earth is not a member of your pathetic alliance. Earth became a provisional member of the Accord 50 years ago," Morvis replied. "An attack on Earth is an attack on the Council itself. I repeat, withdraw or face destruction. The hegemony fears nothing. Your threats are empty. Morvis's voice changed, becoming something harder and older than Walsh had ever heard. Then let me show you what the Council fears. The Council fleet opened fire. The hegemony had spent 2 centuries conquering species that could not fight back. They had grown arrogant, believing that their numbers made them invincible. They had never faced an enemy with superior technology, superior training, and absolutely nothing to lose. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the hegemony fleet had been annihilated. Supreme Commander Vox's flagship was a drifting hulk, its weapons silenced, its crew surrendering in the face of overwhelming defeat. Admiral Walsh sat in her command chair, staring at the display in numb disbelief. Around her, the bridge crew was silent, struggling to process what had just happened. Her communications officer broke the silence. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Council flagship. High Chancellor Morvis wishes to speak with you." "Put him through." Morvis's face appeared on the view screen. He looked older than Walsh remembered, as if the decision to intervene had cost him something fundamental. "Admiral Walsh," he said quietly, "the Council offers its congratulations on your survival." "Thank you, High Chancellor. Although I confess I am surprised to see you here." Morvis was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Ambassador Cole asked me a question before he left the Council chamber. He asked what kind of species we wanted to be. A species that watches others die, or a species that stands for something. And what did you decide?" "I decided that 800 years of neutrality was long enough." Morvis paused. "The hegemony declared war on the Council when they attacked Valderan Prime. We simply chose not to acknowledge it until we were ready." Walsh felt a laugh building in her chest, born of exhaustion and relief and something that might have been hope. "You were planning this all along." "Planning is too strong a word. But when humanity showed us what courage looked like, some of us remembered that we had once possessed it ourselves." The transmission ended, and Walsh leaned back in her chair. Outside the view screen, the wreckage of 2 fleets drifted through the void, lit by the blue light of Earth. The war was not over. The hegemony still controlled vast territories, and the resistance movements that humanity had sparked would need years to complete their work. But the Krath would never threaten Earth again. Their fleet was broken, their power shattered, their reputation for invincibility destroyed forever. 3 days later, Ambassador Raymond Cole stood in the Hall of Voices for the final time. The chamber that had once seemed so hostile was transformed. Delegates who had called for humanities containment now rose to applaud as he entered. High Chancellor Morvis spoke the words that would change the galaxy forever. The Galactic Council hereby grants full membership to the species known as humanity. May their courage inspire us all. Raymond accepted the formal declaration with a bow. Then he turned to face the assembled delegates. 16 months ago, the Valderan sent a signal into the darkness. They were dying, and no one would help them. Humanity heard that signal and made a choice. We chose to answer. He paused, his eyes sweeping across beings from 1,000 different worlds. That choice cost us everything. We lost ships. We lost colonies. We lost people we loved. Commander Okafor, Captain Salantus, and thousands of others gave their lives for a cause they believed in. His voice grew stronger. But we gained something too. We gained allies. We gained friends. We gained the knowledge that the galaxy is not as dark as it sometimes seems. Because when the Valderan cried for help, humanity answered. And when humanity faced destruction, the Council answered. That is the galaxy I want to live in. A galaxy where no one cries alone. He stepped back from the podium as applause filled the chamber. Later, In the quiet garden where he had first spoken with Ambassador Tullus, Raymond found Lyra Voss waiting for him. The Morith leader had emerged from hiding after the war, her people finally free after 50 years of oppression. "You did it," she said simply. "You actually did it." "We did it," Raymond corrected. "All of us?" Lyra smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, the expression reached her eyes. "What now, Ambassador?" "The war is over. The hegemony is broken. What does humanity do next?" Raymond looked up at the artificial stars that glittered in the garden ceiling, each one representing a world that was now free. "We keep our promises," he said. "We help rebuild what was destroyed. We make sure that the species who suffered under the hegemony have the chance to find their own way. And if someone else cries for help?" Raymond thought of Commander Okafor, holding the line at New Helsinki, while civilians escaped behind him. He thought of Captain Santos, smiling as she flew her ship into the heart of an enemy fortress. He thought of every soldier, every pilot, every ordinary person who had chosen to stand up when standing up seemed impossible. "Then we answer," he said quietly. "That's what we do. That's who we are." Lyra nodded slowly. "Then perhaps there is hope for this galaxy after all." They stood together in the garden as the stars wheeled overhead, two representatives of species that had been shaped by war and suffering and loss, but also by courage and sacrifice, and the stubborn refusal to abandon those in need. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed it. And whatever challenges lay ahead, one truth had been proven beyond all doubt. When someone begs for help, humanity answers, with everything they have got always.